Hello everyone, welcome to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 10. I can't believe I've done 10 episodes of these already. It feels like I only started making these videos about 2 or 3 months ago, but it's actually been about 6 months, so it's just gone by really fast. I've gotten a lot of new subscribers over the last month, so I just thought I would do a quick reintroduction because I haven't really introduced myself since episode 2 or 3, I think. So as I said, my name is Michaela. I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland, and I've been knitting for about 2 years, and before that I was crocheting for 2 years. In my full-time job, I'm a scientist, hence the channel name Stitches in STEM, and when I'm not knitting, which is not very often, my other hobbies include video games, walking my dog, I do some pole fitness. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that over there. Yeah, that's pretty much all of the main points. So with that out of the way, let's get into the episode. I'm not wearing any knitwear today, as you can probably tell, so just a disclaimer. Oh, actually, I am wearing hand knit socks, but that's it. It's quite late in the day right now, and I am a little bit worried about the natural light. I do have lighting, obviously, here, but nothing beats the natural light, so I am going to try and get through this without rushing, because I don't really like feeling like I'm rushing through an episode either. So we'll just get straight into it, and I actually have no finished objects for today, but I do have a good few WIPs, and the first one is my Sweet Shop blanket, which is a pattern by Laura Penrose. I'm using the Olivia and Oliver Fibres Advent Calendar from 2023, along with Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Cloud. It is too big to show on camera, obviously sitting down, but I'll insert some B-roll footage. So I'm holding both of the yarns double on 4mm needles, and I've currently added 126 squares out of a total of 168, so I still have a few more to go. I talked about my colour layout and my thoughts on the pattern and stuff in previous episodes, so if you are interested in hearing those, I definitely recommend going back and watching my last few episodes. And I don't actually have any major updates on this because at this point I'm just adding squares, and I've kind of put all of my thoughts out there already. I am running out of steam, I'm afraid. I'm not enjoying the process as much as I used to. I am enjoying watching it grow, but I don't enjoy putting in the work to make it grow, so that's a bit of a catch-22. I can't wait to have it. I just want to be working on other things right now, and I do have about another month of work left on this, so hopefully if I power on through, I can be done by the end of October. I don't hate it. My enjoyment is probably like a 4 out of 10, so I don't hate it. I want to be working on other things right now, and I know I would be justified in putting it aside, but I don't want to do that because it's the kind of project that if I put it down, I'll never pick it back up. And I definitely don't want that to happen. In the next episode, it will definitely still be a WIP, but in the one after that, hopefully it will be a finished object. I also wanted to mention that I think I got my mic situation sorted out. So I did have a mic a couple episodes ago. It didn't work. I don't know why, but I have it sorted now and it should work. I know some people are sometimes interested in equipment and stuff. So this is the Rode Wireless Go, in case you're curious. And I also have the Rode Lavelier, is that what it's called? I can't see the box anywhere, but it's basically the Rode lapel mic that you buy separately and you clip on. My next WIP is my current pride and joy, and it's my Rivendell Cardigan, which is a pattern by Sari Nordland. It's a V-neck, drop shoulder cardigan with cables down the front and the sleeve, and I've modified mine so that the sleeve cable, instead of starting at the drop shoulder seam, it starts up at the front cable. It's probably too dark to see on camera. Oh, there you go. It's brightening up a bit. So you can see there the sleeve cable kind of starts up at the neck instead of down at the shoulder. I went over the modifications in a lot of detail in the last few episodes, so if you're curious about those, I definitely recommend going back and watching those episodes. And I also have the notes in my Ravelry project page. They're very detailed notes without being so detailed that it gives the pattern away. I don't want to be giving away a paid pattern, so it was hard to kind of toe the line in like how much detail I should be giving away in those modifications, but hopefully they're helpful if you own the pattern and you want to make those modifications yourself. The yarn is Sandnes Garn Tin Pure Gint and the colour number is 4672, and I'm holding it together with Filca Lanatilia in the colour Amethyst. And I'm working the main sections on 3.5mm needles, and then the ribbing is on 3mm needles. I think the double knit button band is on 3mm as well, but I just haven't started that yet. In the last episode I had a few inches left to do in the body and I was a bit worried about yarn chicken, but after uploading I realised that I'd made some mistakes in my calculations. So I said that one cable repeat on the body weighed 12 grams and that I only had a 50 gram ball of yarn left for the body. Both of those things are true, but the 12 grams of yarn was actually the 2 strands held together, whereas I was only considering the 50-gram single ball of tin pear gint. So when the 2 strands are held together, 12 grams is going to be about 8 grams of tin pear gint and 4 grams of the Filca lanatilia, because the tin pear gint is approximately twice as heavy as the mohair. So that meant that one cable repeat of the body actually only used 8 grams of the tin pear gint. And if I had a 50-gram ball, that meant that I could get about 6 cable repeats left in the body. And I didn't need to do 6 more cable repeats. So that kind of put my fears at ease a little bit. I did have to do, I think I had 4.5 more repeats to do, and then the ribbing. Even taking that into consideration, I knew that there would be a risk that I would still be playing yarn chicken. So I had to decide whether or not I needed to order another ball. And I was actually placing an order for a different yarn from a yarn shop in Europe. And if I did need to order another ball of the tin pear gint, it would obviously be better to order both of those together to, you know, not double up on the shipping fees. So I was trying to figure out what was the quickest way to decide if I needed to order that ball or not. Since I was already so close to finishing the body, I decided just finish the body, get it done out of the way, and then I would pick up the second sleeve and start figuring out how much yarn I needed for the sleeve. So at that point, I had done all of the first sleeve except for the cuff. So I finished the body, then I went back to the first sleeve and I finished the cuff, and I weighed how much yarn the cuff used, and it was about 4 grams. So I kept that in mind. Then I went back to the second sleeve over here and I picked that up. I weighed my yarn. I worked about 10 rows and I weighed it again. And I used that to calculate how much yarn I was going to need for the entire sleeve. I can't remember the figure now off the top of my head, but it basically left me with 44 grams for the double knit button band. And after scouring through other patterns on Ravelry that have a double knit button band and trawling through the projects to find ones that mentioned how much yarn they used for their double knit button band, which were few and far between, I figured that I would need between 42 to 48 grams for a double knit button band, just of the tin pear gint, not of the 2 yarns held together. So, because that's the yarn that I was running out of. The mohair I had enough of. So 42 to 48 grams for the double knit button band, and I have about 44 grams. So it's definitely a bit risky, but a few people commented on my last video saying that I could actually start the double knit button band from the back and work down both sides, which I didn't know was a thing. Like, it seems obvious in hindsight, but I just didn't think of that. So that way you can adjust the length of the body if you need to. So I think I'm going to do that and I'll see how I get on. I also made the sleeves purposely long because I tend to always make my sleeves accidentally too short. I always worry about making them too long, and so I accidentally make them too short. But this time I made sure to make them a little bit too long, and I figured I can undo it if I need to. I haven't actually bound off the sleeve yet, so it's still on the cord, and the same for the body, that's still on a barber cord. So those are finished but just not bound off in case I need to take some of the yarn out. So my plan is to block it, assess the length, start the double knit button band from the back neck down, and if I need to take yarn out of the sleeves to finish double knit button band, I'll do that. If I need to take so much yarn that it makes the sleeves ridiculously cropped, I'll just order another ball, but I don't think that'll be the case. So, I don't know. Famous last words, we'll see. The finishings are done in half twisted rib, which I've actually never done before, which surprised me because I've done a lot of twisted stitches, but I realised I've never done it in a rib or a half twisted rib, so it was actually a little bit strenuous. I understand why people dislike twisted rib or half twisted rib. When knitting through the back loop, it was easier to actually insert my needle into the front and lift it over the top of the left needle so that it was at the back then, and then work the yarn over, or then work the knit stitch. Because working straight into the back of the knit stitch, like it can obviously be a bit fiddly, like you need to aim your needle correctly, or you need to, you take some time, it takes a second to aim your needle and get it into the back loop. Whereas I was inserting into the front loop as if to purl, but except with the yarn in the back. And then, yeah, lifting the right needle over the top of the left needle and knitting the stitch through the back loop that way. I found it was a little bit quicker, a little bit smoother. I didn't have to fiddle as much with like aiming my needle. So that's all I have to say about this. I actually wish I had more to say just so I could show it off some more, because this is my pride and joy. I have been loving this project so much. I'm loving the process. The only reason I want to finish this is so I can wear it. I could honestly keep working on this all day, every day. Like, I've just been having so much fun with it. Even the challenges, like any kind of speed bumps that I've hit when making this, I've enjoyed figuring out how to overcome them. And I feel proud of myself. I feel really proud of myself for for the way this has turned out, and I've received so much positive feedback both on YouTube and on Instagram, so thank you for that. It's been really, really nice to read all of your lovely comments about this project, and yeah, I'm just really happy with it, and I'm so glad you guys are liking it too. My next WIP is a Courage Henley, which is a test knit for Tori U or Tori Knits NYC. This is a saddle shoulder Henley top. This is frustratingly close to being a finished object. Literally blocked, all the ends are woven in, it just needs the buttons. So yeah, I'm a bit frustrated that I don't have it finished for today, but it's fine. The yarn that I'm using is Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Dark Ochre, and the needle size that I'm using is 4mm, but I did go down to 3mm for the ribbing, both on the cuff and the hem and around the neckline. This colour was definitely a bit out of left field for me. I've never worn this colour, let alone knit with it, so even when I bought it I was like, this could be a risk, but I think it paid off. I actually really like this colour. I could definitely see myself wearing this, so the colour is definitely a winner for me. It's also my first time working with Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, and it won't be the last. I really enjoyed working with it. It works up quite fast because it is a worsted weight yarn, but it also blocked out really softly. I didn't actually expect it to be this soft after blocking because it wasn't that soft before blocking. I could wear this next to skin, although this particular project I'm going to be layering. The one thing I will say about the yarn is that it bled so much. It just surprised me because you don't expect to see bleeding from this kind of colour. You usually see it from navies or purples or reds, and so I was just really, really surprised at how much this seemed to bleed. I hand washed it in, I didn't check the temperature of the water, but it was about 30 degrees Celsius, and a bit of wool wash, and the water was the colour of the yarn, and then I rinsed it like 2 or 3 times to get the wool wash out, and the water was still this colour, so it didn't seem to stop bleeding, and I wasn't bothered to keep rinsing it. So I mentioned in my last episode that I don't want to give my final thoughts yet, and that is still true, just because the pattern hasn't been finalised yet, and this still isn't a finished object because it doesn't have the buttons. But my first impressions are pretty good. I have been wanting a Henley in my wardrobe for a while. I was actually going to make Tori's Highline Henley. My plan for that would have been to make it a next to skin kind of piece, like something that I would just wear on its own. I think it's a lighter yarn weight, that one. But when I made this one, because of the worsted weight yarn and the positive ease, I definitely think it's better as a layering piece. The thing is, it's got quite a wide neckline, so I find it doesn't look great with a crew neck t-shirt, which is what most of my t-shirts are. And this is actually why I wore the scoop neck today, so that I could try it on and show you. Yeah, you can see, like, obviously you can see the side of the t-shirt and just the bottom here, and I think that looks good. But if it was a crew neck, it would be up here, and I personally don't like that look. So it does mean that I'm going to have to wear this top with a scoop neck or like a v-neck top or t-shirt underneath, which I don't have a lot of, but I have enough that I can still get good wear out of this. And I'm actually happy to buy more kind of cheap scoop neck tops if it means I can wear this Henley, because I really like it and it's very cozy. Obviously the colour is very autumnal, so yeah, I'm in my element with this top. It is incredibly warm out today. I think we're getting a bit of an Indian summer. It's predicted to be pretty warm for the rest of the week, so I'm not really here for that. I'm in autumnal mode. If you've watched any of my last 3 or 4 videos, I've just talked non-stop about how I can't wait for autumn, so I just want to be able to wear my woolly jumpers. So yeah, I'm not really here for this heat wave. For the bind off on the neck area, I did a tubular bind off initially, but I for once actually thought that a regular bind off looked better, just because I think that the dead straight edge that the regular bind off gives looked a bit neater on this kind of Henley opening, as opposed to those bumps you get with the tubular bind off. I did do a tubular bind off for the cuff and the hem, but I didn't do the setup rows because I kind of forgot, and by the time the hem was long enough, I realised I didn't want to add any more length with the setup rows. They don't add much, but they do add a little bit, and I just thought the hem was long enough, so I just went straight into the sewn bind off. I tried googling what the purpose of those setup rows is, and I got a few different answers. You know, some say it added stretch, and some people said it added structure. Some people said it was just to set up the tube of the tubular bind off, because when you do those setup rows, you're essentially splitting your stitches in half, and one half is going this way and one half is going this way, and then you join them together using your sewn bind off, so that makes that tube in the middle of those 2 setup rows. I personally don't see any huge difference in this tubular bind off compared to other projects I have with a full tubular bind off, including the setup rows. But I'll probably still do the setup rows in the future. I don't know why. It was just an inclination I have to see everything through fully. So I'll probably always do the setup rows. But it's good to know that if I don't include them for whatever reason, it's not going to have a huge effect on the project. I have bought buttons, I just haven't sewn them on yet, obviously. I was going to get just matte black buttons, like the ones in the sample photo, but in the shop I just saw these little brass ones and I thought they went really well with the mustardy kind of yellow colour. They did have matte black ones and I just thought the contrast was too high. Like this colour gives off kind of antique vibes to me, and the matte black buttons did not give off those same vibes. So that's why I went with these buttons, which I think do give off those same vibes. So I'm very excited to put them on and I can actually start wearing this. I don't know when the pattern's going to be released, but the testing deadline is the 3rd of October, so I assume it will be shortly after that. But of course I will mention it here on my Instagram, and obviously you can follow Tori on Instagram if you have your eyes on this pattern too. My next WIP is another project that should be done but isn't, and it's just a pair of Shortie Socks. I am embarrassed that these aren't done yet. They've very much been a background project for me. I've kind of only been working on them when I'm commuting on public transport, which isn't very often, so I just haven't been working on them a lot. The yarn that I'm using is Life in the Long Grass Fine Sock in the colour Jellyfish, and I used this yarn before to make a pair of socks and I had about 45 grams left over, so I decided to make a pair of toe-up socks and see what kind of length I could get out of those 45 grams. I'm actually giving these to my mum because I already have a pair of socks in this colour, and like the socks that I have are a vanilla sock, they're just mid-calf, so they're pretty much the exact same, just longer. So I don't want a second pair of socks in the same colour, so I'm giving them to my mum. They are much shorter than I thought they would be. I did expect that I would get a little bit longer out of them, so I'm kind of surprised. But they are the same length as my kind of commercial ankle socks, but just because commercial socks are a lot stretchier, so these don't feel like they have as much grip around the ankle, like the cuff doesn't have as much grip. So it does kind of feel like they might have a tendency to slip off. I literally just bound off this sock before filming so I could try it on and give my thoughts on that. So this is very much my first impressions, my initial thoughts, and I haven't actually worn these yet to know how they wear. The second sock, I have finished the heel, I'm ready to move on to the cuff. I just haven't started the cuff. I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do with the cuff. I think if I had enough yarn I would have done a folded down cuff, but I didn't obviously have enough yarn for that. So I initially did a 1x1 rib and I bound off with Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. It was definitely not tight enough, it was quite floppy, and I knew it would definitely not stay up around the ankle. So I ripped it out and I decided to do a twisted rib instead. This is a full twisted rib, so both the knits and the purls are through the back loop. And I worked that for 7 rounds, and then I initially started a twisted tubular bind off. And I did a few stitches and it wasn't stretchy at all. I don't know why, because it should have been stretchy, but it just had no give in it whatsoever. So I knew that wouldn't do. I ripped it back and I did Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off again. And they turned out better than I expected then. I didn't expect that to work. I kind of thought it was a lost cause. I thought that I was going to have to just work in stockinette until this ball of yarn ran out and then switch to a contrast colour for a longer cuff. But this actually does feel a little bit more secure than the regular 1x1. So as I said at the start of this segment, it doesn't feel like as tight as a commercial sock, but yeah, I think it's a 50-50 chance on whether or not it will stay up. So because these are not for me, I just did a regular symmetrical toe instead of an anatomical toe like I usually do. And I also did a fish lips kiss heel because I feel like it's kind of universally well fitting. I think it's a good option if you don't know, the contours of the gift recipient's foot in detail. So that's why I went with the fish lips kiss heel. One thing I will say is that I was working on 9-inch circulars for most of the sock except for the heel, which I switched to Magic Loop 100cm cord. And I used to make socks on Magic Loop and I didn't have a problem for a long time, and then after a while I noticed my socks were getting a bit looser. My gauge was still the same, like I was getting the same number of stitches per inch. I don't know if it was the way I was knitting had changed the structure of the individual stitches to the point where they were a little bit stretchier or something. Does that even make sense? I don't know. But that's when I switched to 9-inch circulars, I noticed that socks felt tighter again. So I figured it was something to do with the long cable or the long cord. And when I worked the heel on that long cord, I also noticed that my gauge was looser. Because you're working back and forth, every second row is a knit row, and especially on the knit rows, whenever I did the turn at the end of the knit row, that stitch, the stitch that you turn, looks really loose and open. And I'm not too happy with it, but it's going to stay because it's just a sock and nobody's going to see it. The Fish Tips Kiss heel pattern is very wordy. It wouldn't be my first choice in terms of the style of pattern. It's a lot of pages just for a heel. Like, it surprised me when I first opened it. She does go into a lot of detail on how to measure your foot and things like that. And the first time I made it, I skipped all of that and went straight to the heel. And it worked. Like, it worked out fine. But I did add a few increases into that heel. This time, I kind of read it a bit more, and she actually had a box where she said, I promise you, if you measure your foot correctly, you won't need to add increases. And I was like, that's interesting. She wrote that she had made socks for loads of people, and as long as she measured their foot correctly, she never needed to add increases for the heel. So that was interesting to me, and I figured, okay, I'll put my trust in the pattern and I'll do the measurements as she says. I ended up working a lot more rows in the foot than I usually would. So that's why I didn't really trust it at first, because I thought that seems like really long for the foot. But I did work the foot until I was instructed to in the pattern. And I have to give it to her, it does fit around the instep, which I didn't expect. It does fit a lot more comfortable along the instep, but it also feels like there's a bit of space at the back of the heel that I don't need. So I'm wondering if that's to do with the extra rows that I added. And maybe if I just add a few less, will it fit better next time? Maybe. My mum and I are the same shoe size, so I'm confident that if this fits me, it will fit her. I'm not too worried about that. So, like, yeah, they're not perfect. There's a few things that I would do differently if I was fully invested in them. If they were for me, I would also be having the same attitude. I'm not just saying this because they're not for me and I don't care. I do care about, giving my mum a wearable pair of socks, but they're not like a proper gifted pair of socks. It's more like I have the yarn, I want to make this project, but I don't want the finished object because I already have one of them. So here you go. I will make her a dedicated pair of mammy socks at some point in the future, and I'm also making her a cardigan for Christmas, so I do care. And definitely by the next episode, they will be finished. My next project is not a new cast on, but I haven't shown it before. And that's my Ranunculus by Midori Hirose. And this is, if you don't know what the Ranunculus is, where have you been? It's a circular yoke lace pattern that I cast on over a month ago, but then I got accepted for that Courage Henley test knit, so I put it into hibernation. The yarn is left over from my tea number 1. It's Suec Whisper Lace in the colour number 133. It's a very dark green. Suec Whisper Lace is a wool silk blend. I think it's 70% wool and 30% silk. I think this pattern first came out when I started knitting, and I just wasn't really taken by it. I didn't understand the hype. I didn't get it at all. However, having it broadcast on my Ravelry front page every day for the last 2 years has meant that it has grown on me, and I wanted to see what all the hype was about. So I'm working on a 6mm needle, which is, I think it's the recommended needle size in the pattern. And there are 2 neckline options in the pattern. There's a smaller and a wider neckline. I initially cast on for the smaller, but it was actually quite tight. I could get it over my head, but it was like a proper crew neck, like right up against my neck, which I didn't like. So I went back and I actually cast on the wider neckline on 5.5mm needles. The reason why I didn't do the wider neckline in the first place was because in the photos it looks almost as wide as this, which is not really what I was going for, or maybe even wider. And I just wasn't going for that kind of look, so that was why I didn't cast it on in the first place, but it actually turned out to be the perfect size. There's German short rows in the back and in the front, which is unusual for me. I don't think I've ever done German short rows in the front, so I'm curious to see how that looks. I think they're optional. Of course they're optional. You can do anything you want in knitting, but I decided I would just follow the pattern and see how they turned out. I am noticing this bulge in the back German short rows, which I'm hoping is just due to the lace scrunching in. Overall, I'm really enjoying this. 6mm needles are generally over my limit of comfort when it comes to needle size. And also the fact that it's a lace weight yarn, held double, I don't know if I said that, I'm holding it double. The stitches were tightening up on the cord, so once I passed them off the end of the right needle onto the cord, they tended to tighten up, and it was very difficult to get them back onto the left needle. There was one row in particular towards the start of the yoke where you actually insert your needle in between stitches and you pull up a loop and use that to create another stitch. And that row in particular, and the row after it, I found to be quite strenuous on my hands, and that's actually another reason why I put it into hibernation. I did those rows and I was like, I'm not looking at that again. That hurt my hands. I don't want to do that. But someone once left a comment on one of my older videos advising me to swap the left needle for a smaller size. So that's what I've done here. I'm using a 5mm on the left and the 6mm on the right. And the difference is night and day. It's so much easier. I'm really enjoying this project now. I'm having absolutely no issues with, you know, getting stitches onto the needle or anything, or working the stitches. I'm actually flying through the yoke. I think I've only got like 2 rounds left. Then there's a few raglan increase rounds, and then I'll split for the body and sleeves. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this. The yarn is very interesting. As I said, it's left over from my tea number 1, or I hope I said that. I held it with Issayer Alpaca 1 in that project. So this is my first time using it on its own. And it's got an interesting texture. I think it feels like crunchy. Can yarn feel crunchy? I don't think it should. But anyway, I think it will block out really nicely. I'm very excited to block it. So yeah, that's my Ranunculus. And if I have any barber cord, I'm going to try it on actually. Let me just remind you that this is the wider neckline. Like, that doesn't look like the wider neckline in the photos, but maybe when it blocks out it will look more like it, which I hope it doesn't. I'm actually really happy with the neckline size at the moment, so if it doesn't grow too much, I'll be happy. So that's all of my projects for today. I actually feel like I got through that pretty fast, and I didn't mean to. If I came across like I was rushing, I apologise. It wasn't my intention, but maybe I just had it in my head that the daylight is fading. And in terms of my plans, most of my plans revolve around the yarn that I shared in the last video, because I obviously showed a lot of yarn in that video, and I'm planning to cast that on pretty soon. The next thing I really want to cast on is my Ingrid sweater, which I talked about in the last video. Other than that, the only thing I want to cast on that I haven't mentioned before is a pair of socks. And I want to use this yarn that I got in Helsinki in February, I think. It's a hand-dyed yarn from Finland. The brand is called Luhitaran Luola. I looked it up and it means Miner's Cave, which is a really cute name. The colour is handwritten and I actually can't make it out. I think it says Utu, U-T-U, I think, or Uta. I can't really make out the handwriting, but it's a dusty kind of, I would call it, it's definitely pink. Definitely a cool toned pink. It's leaning towards a purpley pink rather than a warmer kind of red tone. Because this is a tonal yarn, I want to do a textured sock. So I'm thinking all over lace sock. Bonus points if it was a designer that was new to me. So I went onto Ravelry and I had a look. And I came across a pattern called Toivo Harju by a designer called Heidi Alander. And she's Finnish. So that was another bonus. So I'm using a Finnish yarn with a Finnish design from a Finnish designer who I've never heard of before. So I'm very excited to cast those on. They're all over lace. I think I'll be more enthusiastic about those socks than about the ankle socks I talked about today. And that's pretty much it for today. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more, please do subscribe. And if you have any thoughts or any questions about anything that I talked about today, please do leave a comment down below and let me know. And otherwise, I'll just see you in the next one. Bye.